In conjunction with this, I also work in Australia as a youth coach for homeless youth between 12 and 15. With only 10 years remaining to achieve the 2030 Agenda, accelerated action in addressing the interlinkages between the three pillars of sustainable development, social, economic, and environmental, is essential. With 42% of our global population now under the age of 25, youth are not just future leaders, but more importantly, they are current and future agents of change, contributing greatly to the plight of the 2030 Agenda. While the voices of young people are frequently overlooked due to our lack of experience or access to resources, we do hold the passion, experience, and drive to truly make a difference, both at the local level and together at the international level, if we are given an opportunity, of course, to have a seat at the table. So heeding the international community's call to further include youth and people with a lived experience in diplomacy, as well as at the grassroots, today we are lucky enough not to just have a seat, but to actually fill the table and share our perspectives on the issues and intersections of family homelessness and technology in the context of the Commission's theme. Furthermore, each of us in attendance will contribute to discussions and solutions that are necessary to address these issues as a global community, aiding to ensure our global aspirations, such as the 2030 Agenda and the achievement of human rights for all, are met. By giving voice to the perspective of people with a lived experience of homelessness, displacement, and university students on how family homelessness is affected by technology, we will explore the role of digital technologies on social development and the well-being of all, especially for the most marginalised people in our world, including migrants, refugees, visible and hidden homeless populations. I'd now like to introduce and hand over to the yin to our yang of wisdom, Quinn, the Executive Director of UNANIMA International and founder of Sophia Housing Dublin, an expert with knowledge from both the grassroots and the United Nations, to give us some opening remarks.
Thank you, Molly. And we are here in Ireland when you called out all the countries, just to make sure you know we're here. And so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you are in the world at the moment, from our team, Eliza, Molly, Kirin, our interns, and our volunteers. We welcome you to this afternoon's event. And I also want to include our NGO colleagues, our NGO Committee on Social Development, the Working Group to End Homelessness, UNDESA, and especially our co-partners today, the Sisters of Notre de Namur, in the person of Grace is here with us, and maybe some others as well. It's great that we're here together. This is the final day of the Commission on Social Development 59, and the theme was socially just transition towards sustainable development, the role of digital technologies on sustainable development, and the well-being of all. UNANIMA International has for the past few years been highlighting family homelessness, as we see it, the hidden homeless and the furthest left behind in our world. Today's event is looking at family homelessness and technology. And when I was thinking about the theme today, I was looking back to when I first started in this work in 1987 and advocating for the human right to housing with support. And now we're talking today about the human right to digital technology for all. And I think over a 5-year period when I did research internationally, that was definitely not on the cards because it was something that excluded people. They couldn't, it wasn't affordable. So now we're looking for it as a human right. We continue to advocate for families, particularly women, children, and girls. And I've just come off, I think Winifred is there as well, a call from Ireland where Mercy were presenting some of their global leaders. And we had a global leader from Ireland, Siobhan Golden, presenting on homelessness as she sees it in Ireland, and also presenting a best practice with Sophia, a housing organisation in Ireland. But one of the stark realities of what she said was that in Ireland from 2014 to 2020, there's 184% in women's homelessness. And that really took my breath away. Not surprising in many ways because of the lack of housing and support, but it's what we continue to advocate for. But today we're going to look at family homelessness through the eyes of technology. I'm really looking forward to this. The activists and all of those on this call today have worked really hard to get their presentations ready. And you are the people that will be advocating in the future on behalf of all of us. So you're all very welcome. Thank you. And I hand back to you, Molly.
Thank you, Jean, for your thought-provoking introduction and reflections. I'd like to note that each of our publications from UNANIMA International are also on our website in our resource section, just for anybody that would like to learn a little bit more about family homelessness and hidden homelessness. So now to our first speaker of the 6 speakers, who will explore the vast manifestations of homelessness, its drivers, and offer solutions from a youth perspective. Arianna Pappone was born and raised in Rome, Italy. In 2018, she moved to New York to attend at St. John's University, where she majors in global development and sustainability. Traveling around the world for athletic purposes and for her studies has allowed her to have a broader perspective of the world and to know its realities, very different from her own, shaping her passion for studying languages and culture. Interacting with many people with many different backgrounds also made her become aware of social issues, which is why she has developed a strong desire to help solve these issues and advance development. She strongly values UNANIMA International's research and is grateful for this opportunity of collaboration. She will be giving us a perspective of family homelessness and technology and their intersections with inequalities. You have the floor, Arianna.
Thank you for the introduction and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. So this morning, I'm going to be talking about vulnerability and access to digital tools. And I would like to start with a quote of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who said, "I firmly believe that education and digital technology are 2 of the most important investments we can make as we respond to COVID-19 and lay the foundations for a strong recovery and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals." So today we are living in a very particular time in which technology has become an essential part of our lives. We probably wouldn't be attending this meeting if it wasn't for technology. However, despite the fact that technology has become such an essential part of our lives, currently there are still many people who can't access technology and digital tools. Talking about education, worldwide there are currently more than 1.2 billion children in 186 countries affected by the school closures due to the pandemic. And in 2020, it's reported that some students without internet access or technology are struggling to attend digital learning. This gap is, however, not distributed equally among countries. For example, according to the OECD data, while 95% of students in Switzerland, Norway, and Austria have a computer to use for their schoolwork, only 34% in countries like Indonesia do. And education has been proven to reduce risks on homelessness and its drivers. But education isn't the only service that many people can't access because of lack of technology. According to Dr. Kreter and Dr. Viswant, groups with limited access to computer technology are largely the same as those suffering the greatest health disparities and traditionally underserved by the healthcare system. And as it's reported by UNANIMA International in its report on family homelessness in 2020, poor health is a major driver of homelessness in the global North and South. So we've talked about some groups that can't access technology as well as other services. But who are these people? Who is vulnerable? According to the NGO Committee on Social Development in 2020, among the groups experiencing inequalities, we find women, followed by children, the youth, the elderly, people with disabilities, migrants, refugees, and other minorities. In talking about women, we have significant data from the International Telecommunication Union in 2020. On average across the developing world, nearly 25% fewer women than men have access to the internet. And the gap becomes about 45% in regions like Sub-Saharan Africa. And today it's estimated that about 21% of women are online, which is about 600 million people. And it's expected by the Intel that over the next 3 years, we could potentially reduce the gender gap up to 40%, bringing about 1.2 billion women online, just if any action is taken. Another vulnerable category is made up by children. And when we look at the percentage of children and young people with internet access at home by country income group, we see how the numbers drastically change depending on the countries. So low-income countries have just 6 to 8% of children and young people with internet at home, and lower middle-income countries have 14 to 19 people with internet at home. Even in upper middle-income countries, we still have about a little bit less of half of the population not having internet access at home. Finally, talking about migrants and refugees, we have a very interesting study conducted by the GSMA Mobile for Humanitarian Innovation in 2018, which looked at the top barriers to mobile ownership and mobile internet use reported by refugees in shelters like Kaziba, Bedi Bedi, and in countries like Jordan. And when we look at the barriers, we see how we have, a problem of costs that represent a barrier. So for example, cost of phone handset, cost of airtime, but also we see how many people experience difficulty in reading and writing, people not knowing how to access the internet, and some people reported that they have nobody to teach them how. So it's also important to see how it's not just a matter of people having access to these tools, but also many people don't even know how to use them, how to access the internet. But now it's time to wonder, what is the link between homelessness and technology access? Well, to give a definition of homelessness by the United Nations Expert Group on Affordable Housing and Social Protection Systems for all to address homelessness, homelessness is a condition where a person or household lacks habitable space with security of tenure, rights, and ability to enjoy social relations, including safety. Homelessness is a manifestation of extreme poverty and a failure of multiple systems and human rights. So today, having technology access means to have a digital identity. And a digital identity allows us to access most of the basic services. We, to access the schoolwork and the courses, we need to have an account. To apply for jobs, we need to have an account, as well as to display our health insurance. we need to have an account. So it's important to see how, digital identity is fundamental to access those services. And when you don't digitally exist, you are most likely not financially secure and vulnerable to homelessness and poverty. So thank you so much for your time and enjoy the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Arianna, for your intervention and perspective on family homelessness, technology, and inequalities. It was wonderful to have such clear graphics depicting the inequalities in so many different aspects. And I was especially interested to hear about the links between technology and health and how it is so clearly exacerbating the gender and country-to-country gaps and inequalities, specifically in the context of COVID-19. Our next speaker is here to share her lived experience of migration with us. AjiFanta, who was born in Gambia and migrated to the US when she was 12 years old, is currently completing her master's at St. John's University. She concentrates in international relations and conflict resolution and currently works as a graduate assistant with the government department at St. John's, as well as a research assistant with the Rose Loscombe Foundation, where she assists a coalition of organisations with consultations for victims of human rights violations and compiling evidence for the prosecution of the former dictator of Gambia. In the past, she has held various internship positions, including at the Human Rights Watch and the Bronx Civil Court. She is invested in working to assist victims of mass atrocities and gaining justice from authoritarian regimes, as well as raising awareness on the impact that gender disparities have on the welfare of women during the transitional justice and migration periods. AjiFanta, you have the floor.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. I am extremely grateful to be here. Let me just share this. To share my perspectives on family migration and homelessness. So I'll be focusing on forced migration. As we know, migration is a multifaceted phenomenon. It has been going on for over 60,000 years. And there's multiple kinds of migration. There's forced migration, which is caused by armed conflicts, natural disasters such as droughts or famines. But today we'll be focusing on forced migration caused by armed conflicts, specifically on displaced people. So internally displaced people are persons who flee their homes due to conflicts and other reasons and have to settle in displacement camps far from the conflict zone. So just want us to take a moment and get an idea of the number of people who have been displaced due to armed conflicts. But I'll zoom in into Syria today, and that would be the case study. So currently there's 6.6 million internally displaced persons in Syria. This means they're displaced within the borders of the nation, so they have no legal international status. Out of these, more than half of them, 4 million, are women and girls of reproductive age, 15 to 49. 500,000 of them are pregnant women. 70,000 are currently refugee women who are also pregnant with no homes, and 2.5 million are Syrian children. So although these numbers are alarming, it is important for us to acknowledge that there's persons behind them. There are stories and backgrounds of people who once had homes. And I just want us to keep that in mind throughout this presentation. This is an image of a woman and her child at a Kenyan displacement camp. So the three main stages we're looking at today is during conflict, the displacement period, and how the gender disparities and violence that's present during the conflict and displacement period impact the welfare of women during the migration period. So during the initial state of conflict, women experience gender-based violence, women are raped. The men are mostly killed, which leave women as widows. Their main source of income, which is agriculture for most of them, are destroyed during the conflict, leaving their scarcity of resources, and the families are separated. So when they moved into the displacement camps, the situations get worse. On average, women spend 12 to 17 years in displacement camps. And the sexual violence leads to pregnancies, which also add on to a lot of stigma and humiliation in the community. The destruction of infrastructure leads to lack of access to medical facilities and other resources, and women become the main breadwinners in these situations, forced to travel long distances to get food for their families, and the sexual and gender-based violence continues. Additionally, women are 3.5 times have a higher mortality rate than their male counterparts. As a result, women who end up becoming refugees have high risks of psychiatric distress, they end up taking illegal migration routes, which have risk of being trafficked and end up having no legal status in the destination country, which also means lack of access to basic resources such as housing, education, and medical care. So children have the same experiences in displaced camps. They're basically homeless as well, no shelters. They go on for years without education and lack a lot of basic needs such as nutrition and so on. So the connection between family homelessness and technology is how they'll access these basic needs. So technology can be useful in creating a shared network for the women and children and their families, resource mobilization in terms of reaching and knowing humanitarian organizations in the area that are providing access to these things, locating lost family members. Digital technology can be useful in that sense, getting directions and transportation. And in terms of migration, the network that they have abroad, they can communicate with each other to share valuable information on how to migrate legally and safely, and data and reporting of their situation and whatever the violence that they're enduring. Additionally, it's really important that sometimes when the country goes back into stability, women get access to resources to know how to return back home, the procedures and the services that are available. So currently there's some good practices, some examples of what UNICEF is doing with their radio program, which provides virtual education for children who have been impacted by armed conflicts such as the Boko Haram. They've been in Syria and other parts of the world as well. And like Arianna mentioned earlier, although technology can be provided, it's the accessibility of it that's very difficult. So 70% of the world's population do not have access to technology. So this means they'll have difficulty being digitally literate. So I am just like putting a list of recommendations that programs for digital literacy to be implemented, which also take into consideration inclusive languages and portable usage, since most of the displaced people are moving around for the most part. And providing digital spaces for migrants and displaced people to be able to share their voices and their experiences, as UNANIMA International has been pushing forward, This would allow the women to empower themselves, to be empowered and advocate for resources and rights and policies to be implemented. So to just conclude everything up, I came up with a list of recommendations and suggestions. First, it's really important to understand the intersectionality between the gender disparities that exist during conflicts and the impact it has on the psychological traumas of women as they reach the new destinations as migrants. And to also know that women need seats at the table since they're the most impacted by armed conflicts. And homelessness and displacement are not faults of the individuals. It is a structural failure and human rights violation that needs to be addressed by a coalition of states, institutions, and private entities as well. Thank you all for your time here today. And my information is here if anyone wants to reach out after this.
Thank you so much, AjiFanta, for sharing your expertise with us. I think I speak for all of us when I say the figures that you shared were absolutely alarming. And further to this, the ongoing risks on welfare and increased vulnerability, especially for demographics like pregnant women and children, as well as the ongoing ramifications of these, is something we all need to work to address. Thank you for providing us with so many positive uses and good practices for technology to ensure that we can mitigate and reduce this vulnerability of migrants. I would like to just highlight one thing you said, is that we are speaking about people and we are talking about their stories and the fact that they have had a home, and that homelessness, it's not a life sentence. It is, of course, just part of people's story. So on that note, I'd like to introduce our next speaker and my wonderful colleague, Kirin Taylor. She is our Research Fellow for Family Homelessness and Displacement at UNANIMA International, and she will be presenting on the topic of hidden homelessness. In her role, she helps bring the voices of those with a lived experience of homelessness and housing insecurity to the United Nations, accompanied by analysis of existing data and literature. She is a politically engaged pacifist who has come from both a peace and social justice education and grassroots services background into research and political advocacy. She has recently received her Masters of Arts in International Relations and a certificate in International Law and Diplomacy from St. John's University in New York, where she is now the adjunct professor in the Department of Government and Politics. Kirin, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Molly. And I'm glad to be going third because I can say that the previous two panelists have already established that family homelessness is indeed a systemic issue and a human rights issue and civil rights issue and not a personal fault. So now that we've established that, I feel much better to go into the presentation and hopefully bring something new. So I'm going to share my screen for a presentation. And I'm coming to about the 1.5 year mark of my research fellowship. And in this time, it struck me greatly just the variety of manifestations of homelessness and housing insecurity and displacement and what that can look like. There are so many different forms, and I think the really unfortunate truth, but also the truth that might give us the unity in order to create political will to address these issues, is that many of us have had these experiences, or someone close to us has, or someone we care about has. So with that, I will begin my presentation on hidden homelessness, which is indeed the facet of homelessness that most affects women and children, which is our priority at UNANIMA International. So recently, our team has been coming to make a working definition of hidden homelessness, and Jean has been very instrumental in this because she has so much experience working with permanent supported housing as a way to address homelessness. So thank you to Jean Quinn, DW, who is the executive director, for the help on this. We've come up with: the hidden homeless do not have a secure place to call home. They are people who remain in unsafe housing, relationships, or living situations. They are people who become homeless but find temporary solutions by staying with family, friends, or living in insecure accommodation. The situation for them is often short-term and unsustainable, meaning they end up in various kinds of shelters and emergency accommodation. This can be due to abuse and domestic violence. The hidden homeless often don't seek support as they don't want abusers to know where they are. So there are many layers of this, and even within this definition, you can see the variety of experiences and manifestations. This is just to serve as an additional reminder that homelessness is not one thing, but is an experience within someone's life. When we're looking at individuals and their experiences, that becomes much more clear. For that reason, I included a few testimonies here, and they are anonymous because these experiences of hidden homelessness often are things that people do not feel comfortable sharing their identity when they talk about. So here's one. I felt scared and anxious until my mid-20s when, in a sense, I split away from my family. My home was not a safe space. When I was a kid, my parents divorced. Both were very poor. My brother and I stayed with my mom, and we were in and out of shelters, friends' houses, for a long time. I don't remember everything very well. I needed that money. I had to deal with it. And that's what I felt like most people face these days. Like, even if it's not escorting, I'm going to have to deal with this so I can get paid. But why should I have to? And this one, actually, we have permission to share her photo. So the name that we've assigned this person to protect their identity is Amelia. And I met Amelia attending a conference on behalf of UNANIMA International in Atlanta, Georgia in September of 2019 now. And what struck me at the time when I was 22, I was interviewing her and she was around the same age, and we just had such different experiences. And yet we were collaborating to try to end homelessness. And it was a very touching time. And despite the difficulty and range of challenges that people experiencing hidden homelessness often face, these are also a lot of the people contributing their testimonies and their stories and helping to end and address it and to inform services.
A tus amigas, vale. No sé, el pequeño flex. Flexea un poco, vale. No se oye, no la...
Can I ask all the panelists to mute themselves? Thanks. Apologies for the interruption. So I want to say again that homelessness, as has been emphasized by other members of UNANIMA International, is something that is also an experience. It's not something that should be a permanent experience. It's something that we hope happens within the lifetime, and then that trauma can be addressed. And we hope that we can make provisions and recommendations that will help to decrease and eradicate homelessness, including these hidden forms. But those stories were just very small excerpts of the stories that were really told, or the whole type of experience that people face. Now, this is a picture from a focus group that we did in Baltimore, Maryland. And that focus group revealed that often the people providing services also have a lived experience. And this is one of the workers there who told us the story that she couch surfed for a very, very long time. And she said couch surfing is real. She emphasized, for her, homelessness was not being in a transitional shelter like where she worked, but rather just bouncing around for years.
Excuse me, Kirin, your screen is gone.
Oh, is it still gone?
No, it's back. Thank you.
Okay. So here's that last picture. I'm not sure why my screen wasn't showing, but it says couch surfing is real. Okay, so now moving on to the technology aspects. There are advantages and disadvantages of technology, like anything, when it comes to relating it to family homelessness and hidden homelessness. And some of those advantages on the individual and family unit level are that they can help facilitate seeking support, accessing services, or sharing testimonies and educating others about the phenomenon. At the organizational and systemic level, technology can help with outreach, monitoring and evaluation, and creating data and research. I've been doing a lot of my research online due to the COVID situation, and even in facilitating fieldwork, technology is an essential component in that. Now, moving to disadvantages, these are just a few of many potential threats, and we hope that you will look at other UNANIMA international research in relation to this. But some of them are that in the case of abuse situations or trafficking, predators use technology and social media as a tool. And it can also be used for surveillance of someone who is being held in a situation unwillfully, or perhaps just in a relationship dynamic that is unhealthy. Another way is a disadvantage is gaps in access, and that could be within a society, or that could be within a home as well. We see that from a lot of presentations this week that have focused on gender. There is a gender gap, and women and girls have less access to technology than men and boys, unfortunately. So these are things that we are trying to prevent with our advocacy. So I want to also talk about a few opportunities through technology and good practices. And those include having emergency hide website functions if you're providing services for people who might be experiencing hidden homelessness. So this is Ruhama, which is based in Ireland, and they have an emergency hide website button and a hide your web history button. And both of those are really good practices for someone who might be experiencing abuse and seeking support. Another way is to help people to empower themselves, and apps can actually be used for this. And Bloom is one example where they send you little notifications every morning to say you are capable, or give a positive message that can help. And I think that's helpful for really any person, because it's really necessary to build up your self-esteem and have a positive view of the world to feel empowered. Now, just bringing this to an end, because I think I've been talking too long, but I'm so glad that we've been able to put on this panel and that some of the youth voices can come through at this year's CSocD. I'm so proud of my students and fellow colleagues for just the great amount of research and effort that's gone into bringing this topic to focus at the UN, and we have to keep it here. But some of our research publications, which we'll link in the chat, have been released within 2020 and 2021, and they're pictured here. And one of the main principles that these are based on and that emerges from them is don't talk about us without us. We have to have the lived experience as a focus. I think I am out of time, so I'm going to skip these recommendations, but they are available within those publications, which all have both recommendations on advocacy and recommendations for member states. And those ones for member states can be used by advocates as well. So I'm going to end there. This presentation was prepared by UNANIMA International, and I'd really love for you all to check out these publications that I've spoken of. And please enjoy the rest of the presentations, as the students have worked really, really hard to prepare them for you. Thanks.
Thank you, Kirin, as always, for your intervention, especially the sharing of our working definition and the stories of the people we've had the pleasure of working with at UNANIMA International for the past few years. It was great to hear directly about the pros and cons to using technology and addressing hidden homelessness, and to look at some of the global good practices. And as Kirin said, please do check out our publications, because there is lots of different information that will suit whatever interests you and whatever you might be advocating for. So up next, we have the pleasure of sharing the work of Mason Pearson, in which he shares his lived experience of homelessness. Mason is a 23-year-old designer, suist, and activist. He is passionate about creating change and engagement through art, and he'd love to create a world where we can grow from each other's experiences, and believes that healing our communities starts with authentic expression of storytelling. So this is from him. Kirin, I'm not sure there's sound.
Be talking about my personal
Sorry, can you hear that? Okay.
experience with homeless.
No, it stopped again.
You have to unmute yourself, Karen. I think that's what it is.
Okay, got it. Apologies, everyone. I'm going to start over and this time it will work.
Hello, my name is Mason Persons. Today I'll be talking about my personal experience with homelessness and my relationship with technology and social media while I was homeless and as I was coming out of homelessness. I use my phone for just about everything. When I was homeless was when I really started to depend solely on my phone for alarms, for access to information, access to other people. I didn't get my own laptop until I was gifted a laptop from my chosen family who knew that my bio mom would not like me having my own technology like that. So it wasn't until I was out of homelessness that I was able to have a laptop of my own. If it wasn't for that laptop, I don't know how I would have finished school. I was writing so many essays. I was really struggling in school while I was homeless to the point where I needed to switch schools to an ALC situation. I spent the year of 2019 using the internet as a way to take classes and learn, be in school without actually being in school. I didn't go to college. I refused to. That's way too much money. And if I wasn't able to have the opportunity to just sit on my laptop. So for a while, I found people on YouTube that could teach me about those things, and I watched their videos over and over again. I went on to the MCTC website to find out their Apparel 101 curriculum and followed it as much as I could on my own. I was able to build my portfolio that way. For the last few years, I was using my Instagram as a way to promote my business and promote my business persona. It was a way for me to try and build a following versus build a community. There was a while there where I was trying really hard to emulate what I was seeing online. This was happening around 2018, 2019, when I was getting out of homelessness and into my first apartment and was still healing from the trauma of homelessness and abuse. But instead of focusing on unpacking that trauma, I decided to hyper-focus on an influencer or entrepreneur type mindset that I was seeing all over Instagram at the time. I was obsessed with how my page was laid out and how often I posted and at what time. And I was constantly looking at my like and follower count. And if someone unfollowed me around the same time I posted something new, nowadays, my technology is something that I can use and wonder, for what did fun, I do? Make not real, a good way. The same as what I would. really become social for me. I value feeling like a real person when I put myself online. I've switched from looking at people who want to be perceived as something that they're not to people that want to be perceived as who they genuinely feel that they are. I follow more queer people. I follow more people of color. I follow more people that are local versus random accounts from all over the place. I've stayed away from influencers and entrepreneurs and instead have shifted to people who see themselves as creatives, artists, community activists, people that want to be seen for the work that they do and the things that they love. And it's been very refreshing to watch people have their ups and downs and watch people learn about themselves and make mistakes. It feels more real. It feels more human than to just sit through and scroll and like and hope that people see you as something that you really aren't. Since the pandemic, I make masks, so a lot of my time over the summer, I was using the internet as a way to advertise my mask making. It was my main source of income for the summer of 2020, and it was a very interesting shift in my relationship with the internet. I had just gotten out of this need to promote myself and my business without even having a real idea of what my business was. I had just gotten out of this very toxic relationship with the internet that was based around me promoting myself. And now I had to reinvent how I was promoting myself, still doing it in a way that I can post and be proud of, but not be obsessed about, while also posting often enough that people will see my product. And there you have it. It was a pleasure sharing this virtual space with you. If you want to get in contact with me or keep up with my work, you can find me at Bibbidi Bobbidi Boy on Instagram, but not getting so caught up in posting that I forget to make my product. It was a very good experience in business and marketing, just getting right in there and figuring it out on my own. And there you have it. It was a pleasure. And I'll catch you on the flip side.
Sorry for the little bit of technical difficulties there, and thank you, Kirin, for fixing it up as we went along. So thanks to Mason, who unfortunately isn't here with us, I don't think, for his wonderful presentation. The use of technology and design, I think, really speaks to the theme of not only this event, but also the commission as a whole. And it's always really great to see successes stories and see how technology can not only promote success, but also how a lack of access to it can really be detrimental and continue cyclic things like homelessness. So our next speaker, Ammaar Dawood, will speak on the topic of refugees and displacement. Ammaar is currently a student of government and politics at St. John's University. As a high school student, he studied abroad in Morocco through the State Department, which spurred not only his passion for languages, but also sparked his interest in the broader Middle East and North African region. As a resident New Yorker, he has volunteered at the ICNA Women's Shelter. His experiences have inspired his passion for peace advocacy and the plight of displaced peoples. As a volunteer at UNANIMA International, he has had the opportunity to pursue these passions through research and discussion. Ammaar, the floor is yours.
Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Ammaar, and I will be talking about the impact of digital technologies on refugees and displaced peoples. So just to give you guys a context, currently there are approximately 79.5 million forcibly displaced people in the world. 26 million of them are refugees, 45.7 million are internally displaced, 4.2 million asylum seekers. On top of this, the COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated the circumstances. Therefore, I believe it's really important to discuss the growing role of digital technologies on the lives of refugees. So for today's discussion, I'm going to be discussing three major topics: smartphones, education, and social media platforms. Um, just before I continue, I think it's important to have this definition of homelessness, just so we can clearly see how the experiences of displacement and homelessness intersect. I'd also like to point out that there's a discrepancy in the way, or there's a difference in perception, the way that we think of refugees versus the actual definitions. So for example, the official number of refugees experiencing homelessness is only really documented once asylum seekers are successfully approved. So that excludes a lot of undocumented refugees in that count. Another problem is that, for example, there are a lot of people who are experiencing the same experiences as a refugee, but because of the definition, they are unable to leave their homes, so they haven't crossed a national border. So they aren't considered refugees; they're considered internally displaced peoples. And I think that is a problem. And also, I think that's part of why there's almost double the amount of refugees as internally displaced people. And I just hope that humanitarian organizations can take that into account and develop over time a more broader definition to also address and aid these people. So moving on to digital technologies. The first and most important, I think, is smartphones, and it's one of the great inventions of the last 10, 15 years. And the ubiquity of smartphones can be understated. Right now, there's about 70% of refugees who have 71% of refugees who have access to mobile phones, and they use it for everything. They use it for staying connected to their family, navigating borders, accessing aid, preserving documents. A lot of the times, because of the nature of refugees um, and the conditions which they leave and they're displaced, they can't really take anything but this smartphone. So it really is a lifeline for them. And it allows them to do many things, but also it's creating some problems that need to be addressed. Um, Connectivity is a problem. There are not enough infrastructures. For example, right now in Tanzania, refugees are giving up a third of their monthly food rations just to pay for data. And that's not a one-off, it's a growing trend. A lot of the times refugees are giving up essential things like clothing, healthcare, even food, just to stay connected. Um, so I think the next thing I'd like to talk about is education. And I think education is extremely important because 40% of all displaced people are children. And it's 50% of refugee children attend primary school due to long-term displacement. That's a huge problem, and it's a human right, access to education, which they don't have. The positive is that organizations, the private sector, a lot of people are trying to find a way for mobile learning, which can be really transformative because they're finding a way to enable learning anytime, anywhere. And that really is transformative because it accommodates the nature of a refugee that experiences displacement because they're always on the move. So things are being invented, like one-on-one virtual language classes, Zoom classes, foreign language apps, educational games for children. But another problem is rising. That is 93% of refugees live in places covered by only 2G mobile networks. Even now, we can tell that like we can't have a Zoom call with 2G. So that's a real problem and infrastructure needs to be created. Something interesting I found was in my research that not only is education important for children and just to keep them on track, but it's also super important for their psychological well-being. We really need to understand that these children are experiencing displacement and homelessness and a lot of trauma. So education can be a form of solace and also like a way for them to have some sense of normalcy. Finally, social media. I think social media is extremely important and it's become extremely popular among refugees. Facebook, Viber, Skype, that's how they stay connected. Oftentimes they are, when refugees leave their homes, they're isolated from parts of their family. So staying connected is one of the most essential things for them. And social media allows that. But furthermore, it also allows visibility. In the past, maybe you needed media and journalists and photographers to raise awareness. But now one person can take a picture and upload a caption and potentially let the whole world see. This is an example that's quite sad, but it just shows you the power of social media. Alan Kurdi, who washed up in Jordan, um, this image was uploaded online and it created a huge media frenzy. And ultimately it was a catalyst for Western countries addressing and introducing policies pertaining to Syrian refugee crisis. So social media has this enormous capacity to bring light to situations that media and journalists and politicians and governments just won't. So lastly, I just want to give some recommendations that need to be implemented. First of all, the private sector really needs to take a role in creating infrastructure, sustainable, inclusive infrastructures for connectivity. So companies like telephone companies, telecom companies, they can really make a difference upgrading digital bandwidth, etc. Humanitarian organizations who do a lot of great work, but they still deliver aid door to door, which is ineffective. Mobile and if they harness mobile technologies, it can be completely transformative. Also, sorry, I'm trying to wrap up. Creating sustainable mobile learning for refugees, having teachers who are trained. You can't just send a regular teacher in to train children, to teach children who experience trauma. So also developing courses for older people. You have to help children, but also don't forget older people who need to learn skills that will help them with their adaptivity. And just finally, I just want to say that technology is here, whether we like it or not, and it's going to continue to have a major role in the lives of refugees and displaced people. Hopefully, humanitarian organizations, multinationals, and us as individuals can harness technology to improve the lives of refugees and displaced people worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amaya. It was so interesting to hear a little bit more in depth about smartphones, education, and social media, especially. I think these are often things that we in the Western world take for granted because they are so much in the palm of our hand. But the poor access and the lack of infrastructure globally, as well as a discrepancy in definitions for different groups of vulnerable people, is really a point that I think was great to make during this presentation. One thing I really got from your presentation in particular was it's all about connection, and the fact that people are in a situation where they are having to choose to be connected over essential items it's just not good enough, and something I think we should all be striving to advocate for. So our final panelist today will be Rocio Moron. Rocio is a student from Spain majoring in biology with a minor in social justice at St. John's University. Her attention has always been drawn towards the needs of the suffering and advocacy. She interns at Bellevue Hospital, a large public hospital which takes care of a great number of people experiencing homelessness. She is a leader within the Midnight Run program, which travels to Manhattan streets to provide resources to individuals experiencing homelessness. She built real friendships with amazing yet stigmatized people. Through these two opportunities, she has come to the conclusion that homelessness is misunderstood. She has also interned at UNANIMA International since spring of 2020 and intends to apply her knowledge in science to research about trauma caused by homelessness, advocate to give a voice to those who unfortunately are not being heard, and most importantly, she wants to serve. Today, she will be sharing a perspective centered around human trafficking. Rocio, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Molly. Hello, so my name is Rocio, and I'll be presenting the intersections between human trafficking and homelessness. So to start with, let's take a look at some facts about human trafficking. So at the moment, 1 in 5 women and 1 in 10 men will be sex trafficked, in addition with 30% of the victims being children. Unfortunately, only 4% of the human trafficking survivors are identified. In addition, this business creates an estimate of $150 billion every year, according to the ILO. However, there are good NGOs and good practices that help stop trafficking. For example, we have this United Nations NGO called Committee to Stop Trafficking in Persons, which not only prevents and tries to eradicate homelessness, but also educates in the trauma that the survivors might be going through. Their main roles would be facilitating anti-trafficking campaigns or advocating for stronger mechanisms to monitor compliance of campaigns that are going on right now, either from other NGOs or from United Nations. So as a research intern, I focused on trauma, and especially as majoring in biology, I was very interested in trauma and the effect and causes of it. So now we will take a look at trauma. So there's several causes that may lead a victim to have trauma, and one of them, it's definitely violence. Could be both violence before being trafficked or violence after being trafficked or during being trafficking. So violence is it's sadly a big impact on the survivors. Also, not having the possibility of making choices, because probably the passport of this survivor is taken away and they are receiving no money. Also, not speaking the language of the country that you're in, or being isolated from family and friends. So all these actions will lead a victim to have trauma or increase the trauma that they previously had due to their child raising experience. Also, I focused on taking a look at different treatment options, either in person or online. So we discovered that there's 4 actions that really help survivors thrive in community. One of them would be a trauma-informed service, meaning that if they go to any company, if they go to a business, to a supermarket, to the DMV, anywhere they go, the people working in those institutions will be able to detect certain behaviors that are related to trauma victims, and they will be able to act accordingly. Also, trauma-specific therapies, where a therapy is one-on-one with a survivor and they work on specific traumas. And also a community that helps the victim and the survivor feel like home and feel like if she's welcomed again in society. So nowadays, a lot of the therapies have been moved online. However, I wondered if this was a good idea, if trauma victims and survivors would receive the same benefits from in-person and from online therapy. And research showed that the reality is that in-person therapy brings major benefits to the survivor. For example, in-person therapy helps the survivor to leave her comfort zone. So to leave her house, to stop being isolated, and to build trust with someone. In this case would be the therapy. Probably she has lost trust in people through her trauma and through her previous experiences. So having that one-on-one moment, it's very essential for the person to build trust again and confidence. Also, it helps her to build a routine, knowing that every day at a certain time she has to leave her house and go to a certain place, helps her to build her routine and again, stop being isolated. And lastly, from the point of view of the therapist, it helps the therapist to read better the body language of the survivor. Being home means that even though there's an easy access and it's more comfortable, it could make the survivor feel more secure, but not in a good way. Secure in the sense of that she doesn't have to confront reality. She could be in her house watching a movie, listening to music without maybe focusing on the therapy. Plus, she could be coerced by people in her surrounding. We don't know who is behind the computer. So talking about technology, we have also recognized that predators have an easier time right now finding victims, and that the trafficking hotline cases have increased 40% since the pandemic, meaning that predators hide behind the screen better. And also, we have found that through technology, it's easier to make payments, meaning that a victim can be transferred from one city to another, from one country to another, and predators can pay each other in an easier way without any need of any bank transaction or a physical transaction. They could use PayPal, Venmo, which is harder to track. And also technology has increased inequalities, not only in the world, but especially in its community. Lastly, I wanted to introduce and finish with how human trafficking connects with homelessness, and how being homeless is a drive for being trafficked. So as Kirin explained, homelessness is not only living in the street, so any type of unstable housing makes an easier access for predators to contact children and women, maybe promising them a stable place and mothers being able to be with their kids. Also, not having a stable food supply probably leads to diminishing health and having health issues, which you don't have probably health insurance, so you would require to pay for those treatments that you're receiving, and maybe and probably you cannot afford it. So predators will take that situation in order to attract you and to say, hey, if you come with us, we will be able to pay your bills or give you stable food for you and your children. So they manipulate. Women that have children probably are being manipulated. Also, and lastly, violence, either previous or after being trafficked, could be a drive for someone to be homeless. Because if you're experiencing violence in the street, you're more vulnerable to manipulation and to trauma. Thank you.
Thank you, Rocio, as always, for your insightful intervention on the intersections of trafficking, family homelessness, and technology. I really enjoyed your points around the importance of treatment and how trauma-informed approaches and trust, as well as community, are such important things when it comes to healing from the experience of trafficking, homelessness, or trauma of any form. I think it's been really interesting throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, the increase of trafficking. And while many borders are closed, we are still seeing such rapid kind of numbers going up. And then just a point on the language and isolation. We had a great question from Jane Quinlan, who said it would be interesting to learn from the panelists about how to learn the language of their new country. So in reference to asylum seekers or refugees or migrants, and how isolation is maintained when the person cannot speak to others in their area. She also wondered if there is volunteers from St. John's who go to places like Newground on Long Island. So I will just offer the floor to our friend from the Ministry of Labour and Social Protection in Mongolia. If you would like to say anything, please raise your hand and you're more than welcome to have an intervention. But to answer your question, we will definitely be sharing the presentations you've seen today on our website and no doubt across our social media. Dusty, I'm just going to allow you to speak. If you would like to keep your question or intervention to a quick 30 seconds, that would be wonderful. Thank you. So we've just requested you unmute, Dusty.
I didn't mean to push the button. I apologize. I think I slipped on my phone.
No worries at all. Thank you for coming to the event regardless. And did we have an intervention from our Ministry of Labour and Social Protection from Mongolia? If not, I would pose the last question from Jane. I think to Rocio, you might be the best person to answer that. But in the meantime, if the panelists would like to think about just one final question, why do you think it's important to have your youth perspective shared on these topics? We'll do a little round table before closing.
So, Maud, to answer the previous question, I personally volunteered in the Mineran program, which is a program where we go every week and basically talk and serve the people that are living in the streets. So I have personally never gone into a shelter because we're not allowed, and it's very hard to get permission to go into a shelter, at least for people under 21 like me. But I've heard their experiences, I've talked to them, and they definitely experience isolation in the sense that they are not able to probably have a safe space. So they always tell me that they prefer to sleep in the streets because inside people are violent, people steal their stuff, they sleep with one eye closed and one eye open because they're not able to trust that people are not going to hurt them. So that's what I've heard from the people that have experience in shelters.
I'd also like to briefly answer the question in regard to languages and how methods for learning languages. We do share about this, Rocio and I, in an upcoming UNANIMA international publication on the intersections of human trafficking and family homelessness, which you should keep an eye out for. But essentially, one way is to reduce trauma and to address this is to have cultural exchange highlighted and emphasized within programs that help survivors, and also as part of supported housing. There's examples around the world of buddy programs where people get a partner who will help them with the language and to become familiar with the culture if they're coming to a new country. And I think that's a really good example. So I hope that answers the question a little bit.
Can I just add a little bit to that question as well? I also volunteer at the Gambian Youth Organization, which serves immigrant communities in the South Bronx. And one of the programs they have, which I notice in a lot of local immigrant organizations, is an immigrant literacy program, which does help with those like language literacies and accumulating into the new cultures as well.
And I'd just like to reach out to Arianna and Ammaar. Do you have any closing comments before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I just also speaking about learning languages. I think that there are some great programs, especially for people who come in America as well, but yeah, in Europe as well. Programs that are subsidized by the subsidized or free by the government that basically allow very quick, immediate, like not just lessons, but like group integration, teaching quick basic skills in communications, like going to the doctor's office and how to communicate, going to the supermarket and things like that. Those are very beneficial. And also like Kirin was saying, buddy programs and having a host partner or a host friend, and getting to check in and meet with them. Conversation is the best way to learn a new language. So those type of programs are especially effective. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that all that has been said was very insightful. And sometimes it's very important to just spread awareness that of these problems, and buddy partners, as it was said, are a great way of learning languages, because we need to have conversation, and the conversation is central. And yeah, to enhance these programs is always important to really spread awareness.
So if any of the panelists would like to share why you think your youth perspective on these issues is important, I think that would be our final question before we wrap up. It seems Molly's gone offline, so we'll just continue on. AjiFanta, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think it's very important because the youth are not just the future, they're also the present. These issues impact youth, and as we've seen throughout the presentations today, how children and young adults are impacted by displacement, immigration, and homelessness. It's very significant to hear their experiences, their voices, and because they're also in these places volunteering and working directly with the impacted population. So it's important to hear their perspectives on it, as well as their proposals on policies.
Thank you so much. How about you, Rocio?
I truly have the same opinion as AjiFanta, but I'm glad to see that every time youth are being more opportunities to speak. So we have to highlight this positive, because I truly feel that UNANIMA, NGOs, and United Nations are giving more opportunities for the youth to speak. And yeah, that's everything. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you, Rocio, and thank you for interning with us for this past year. Let's bring it to Ammaar.
I guess I think that youth have a certain curiosity and also a certain disregard for, I wouldn't say disregard, but they have the ability to challenge existing existing norms and structures. And I think that that's really important. And they can really be change makers. They can they ha- they have the power to act and the power to mobilize, and we're seeing youth activism all over the world. And with technology, it's even more useful. So I think it's really important for youth to be given that platform to be innovators.
Thank you, Amar. And I encourage all of you guys to look in the chat where you're getting a lot of compliments and comments that you are, the future activists. Maybe they also are directed at me, but something to take heart in. And now we go to the last panelist, Arianna.
Yeah, I agree a lot with AjiFanta when she said that, young people are not just future, but also the present of, the world we live in. And, technology has never been more essential than in a time like this. So I think it's fundamental that we hear the perspectives of young people, because we need to have an insight of what's going on today and how we can advance towards development in a way that everyone is included.
Thank you so much. Jean, did you have a final word? You have to unmute.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just very, very excited by the presentations this afternoon. I feel energized. I feel I'm ready to shift because we have these wonderful people that are out there advocating on behalf of the people that I feel passionate about, that are homeless, women, children, girls. And this is what we want our world to be different. Somebody asked about how do you solve it? We want to eliminate homelessness, and certainly by 2030. And we'll keep working at it until we do. But we have great teams working with us, the Working Group to End Homelessness, UNANIMA International, and so many of our NGOs, including Grace, who is going to speak to you now. So thank you all very much. I am very enthused by this afternoon's event.
Thank you so much, Jean. And I just have to quickly say that Molly's power in her street went out. So there's one of those challenges of technology in the middle of moderating. So we can laugh a little bit. But I would say thank you to everyone. And just my final comment is I'm so grateful to be part of a team and community working to end homelessness, and definitely not alone in it. So we're very grateful. And we bring it to you, Grace, to close. Thank you so much for hosting this with us.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to our wonderful panelists today. You will all agree with me that it's been a very enriching, enlightening event. We've listened to our young people, their perspectives on family homelessness. I want to thank Arianna, AjiFanta, Kirin, Mason, Ammaar, and Rocio. On behalf of UNANIMA International, I wish to thank you for your fantastic presentation. Family homelessness is a flake on the human flesh. Everyone deserves a place to call a home. It's a human rights issue. It's a case of human dignity. And we have heard, the young people unpack for us this morning there are different perspectives of family homelessness and the intersection between family homelessness and lack of digital technology vis-a-vis. As we heard, family homelessness is not just about being on the street. There are different forms of homelessness. So I would like to personally thank UNANIMA International Director Quinn for her passion on this issue and her incredible team at the United Nations. Kirin, Molly, Eliza, and a host of others for your untiring advocacy at the United Nations to bring the issue of family homelessness in the spotlight, and for inviting the Sisters of Notre and the Namur to co-sponsor this wonderful event with you. Thank you very much. And for all of you that have joined us from different parts of the world, we want to say a big thank you. Stay safe and have a wonderful rest of the week. Thanks.